The Carcharodons are, without a doubt, one of my favourite chapters of Space Marines in Warhammer 40k, and I think it goes without saying that they have a ridiculously cool aesthetic and they are a fan favourite amongst other members of the community. And having played a lot of Space Marine 2, I was really happy and really impressed that they were one of the successor chapters that you could see on the actual game. I just think that they're really cool. I run them on the tabletop for my own army, and it's basically the hobby brought to its absolute pinnacle of enjoyment, because you can customize them in so many different ways to make them feel more unique and give them a lot more depth and creativity than a normal Space Marine army, which I enjoy a lot. I always try my very best to make sure that whenever I'm covering a topic, that I have some kind of source material that I can directly use as a book, a White Dwarf article, a audiobook, whatever, instead of just trusting the wiki. And these might be short stories or particular scenes from a wider story that I found enjoyable or important. So lo and behold, one of my most popular videos was one of these moments when I explained the interrogation scene from Silent Hunters and did a bit of voice acting. While this book was a pretty average story at best, it had some interesting moments. So over the past few months, I have made it my mission to slowly read all of the Carcharodon books, and I mean everything out there that is possible under Black Library. And I have to say, the original author for the Carcharodons, Robbie McNiven, he does a phenomenal job, and there are some aspects that even people like Weshammer, when he did his Carcharodon deep dive, there are some bits that he didn't even put into his video, which I can understand. It's already, 45 minutes long, but I think that there are some small little bits and pieces that other people who are fans of the chapter would still like to know about and enjoy having these little details added on, just the icing on the cake. But at the same time, I want to do this comprehensively, and I don't want to ignore little bits and pieces that are overall important in case you don't know about this awesome chapter. So that's why today I wanted to start off by giving everyone a general overview and an introduction to the Carcharodons, while sprinkling in some things that we'll talk about later that are very interesting, and things that you may not know even if you're already pretty well versed in Carcharodon lore. So now that you know the details, let's get stuck into it. The chapter itself goes by a few different names, and they are officially in High Gothic known as the Carcharodons Astra, which is a bit more of an older school naming system which was used back in the Horus Heresy, but their Low Gothic name is the Space Sharks, and this is actually what they were originally called back in 1988 in White Dwarf issue number 101. Unfortunately, I do not have a physical copy of this. However, I have seen some PDF screenshots, and you can actually see the original color scheme for the Space Sharks back then, and it is disgustingly bad. I'm very glad that they changed it, but this is what they originally had for their color scheme, and they were featured in the magazine as one of the chapters involved in the Badab War. Then, skipping forward about 20 to 25 years, GW expands on their lore by having the story of the Badab War retold, and this is when they take a much larger role in that conflict. And then from 2017 onwards, they started getting their own individual books, which is what kickstarted the love for the Shark Boys. They also had their chapter insignia redesigned, along with their overall color scheme to create a much needed glow up. So canonically, it's quite interesting because we have records that have been added in to Warhammer lore from like 2013 onwards, but those records that were added are ridiculously old and date back to the unification of Terra, to the Horus Heresy, Millennium 32, 33, and that goes forward all the way to modern day Warhammer lore. To start off with the basics, the Carcharodons are a fleet-based chapter, and while they have a homeworld which is known as Uthika, it was actually given to them as a reward for beating the Mantis warriors into submission during the Badab War. So they do not properly reside on their own homeworld. It is simply a staging ground that they will use to feed recruits into the chapter whenever they actually can be bothered. Most of the time, though, they are the Hunters of the Void, and they are called as such because that is what their mission is. To quote, "They were dispatched into the outer darkness upon that first day of exile, there to ravage the foes of mankind until their final atonement. Their forgotten one gave them remit unbound to set about the traitor, the alien, and the renegade without mercy, and to harrow them in their places of strength. So began their long hunt. They hunt still." There's a lot to unpack there, but that is essentially the Carcharodons. They have been given the mission to go out into the very void of space. This is both on the outermost edge of Imperial space and the void between galaxies, which is above and below the galactic plane. They do all of this for a final atonement, and while they are clearly a loyalist chapter of Space Marines, they are exceedingly brutal in their combat doctrines. There have been actual situations where other loyalist chapters will not fight alongside them because of how brutal they are. Just to put this into perspective, the Space Marines themselves are almost a monstrosity compared to a normal human. The most battle-hardened of these, warriors who have seen countless fights, look at a Carcharodon and say that? That's pretty unreal. And this brutal savagery is almost a loss of humanity because visually, that's what has started to happen to them. Over countless millennia of hunting in the void of space has almost led to their gene seed mutating and caused them to have a pale, almost bone-white flesh with eyes as black as the void and a scaly and rubbery texture to it, which slowly degenerates further over time. They both look and act like monstrous savages. And that savagery is what brings us to the Badab War. This is where they re-entered the fray. This is where they became more widely known amongst other factions within the Imperium. The Badab War is a much longer and complicated story, but to simplify it and continue to focus on our favourite Sharky boys, 4 Space Marine chapters declared secession of their worlds from the Imperium. As many of you would know, this is a big problem for the Imperium. It didn't outright become a war of rebellion straight away. It started slow, as almost all forms of rebellion do. It was a hoarding of resources to better defend their own sectors, but it would slowly spiral into a full-scale war. Now, after many years of fighting, the traitors, to their credit, had done a pretty good job of fighting against the Imperium. But 2 chapters had joined the Loyalist Space Marines, the Minotaurs and the Carcharodons. The Carcharodons' entry was very sudden and unexpected. When the Carcharodons joined the fray, there was a large amount of confusion, because they arrived as an unidentified fleet, and it was not clear which side they were on. The unidentified Space Marine force claimed to have come in answer to a summons from Terra itself. They identified their chapter as the Carcharodons Astra, using the ancient High Gothic form of their name, and formally requested the Loyalists' permission to enter the war zone and draw blood. Their chapter master, Tiberos, the Red Wake, gave notices which proved their rights and titles issued by several High Lords of Terra and Inquisitors that were now long dead. Just a little side note here, that's unbelievable to have the paperwork from multiple High Lords of Terra is unreal. These are people that have the same rank as Trajan Valoris and Lord Solar Leontis. They are High Lords of Terra. It is almost unprecedented to have that much of a golden stamp of approval that you are a loyalist and that your word is trustworthy. Tiberos even submitted himself for psychic probing and gene sampling. Satisfied with the results, the Loyalists accepted them despite their deviations from the Codex Astartes, and as such, they were given the task of defeating the Mantis Warriors, who were one of the chapters that had turned traitor and had become very troublesome with continued hit-and-run tactics that had run circles around the Loyalists so far. The chapter quickly established a bloody reputation for itself as it engaged in a campaign of systematic annihilation of the worlds of the Endymion cluster. Every planet was put under a scorched earth policy. Their infrastructure would be smashed and countless multitudes of people slain. And this is what forced the hand of the Mantis Warriors to stop their hit-and-run tactics and fight the Carcharodons outright in the field. And this is what resulted in them being crushed. It became very clear that the days of the Mantis Warriors having an effective fighting force were well and truly over, having been taken apart by the Carcharodons. This is also where one of the most famous pictures of their artwork comes into line, because Tiberos is a mountain of a warrior, and even compared to a normal Astartes, he still looks basically like the size of a Primarch, which is very interesting. And there are many other thoughts that people have on that, but that's a discussion for another video. The long story short is that after defeating the rest of the traitors, they were given the blessing to take the resources of the Mantis Warriors. They took as much war material as they could, and also a generation of the system's young men in order to repopulate their ranks. However, these were not in a typical trial. They were submitted to a fight to the death against each other, and those who were deemed strong enough to become Carcharodons were allowed through. Everyone else died. And with that, the Carcharodon fleet disappeared, apparently returning to the dark void above the galactic plane. To quote, "We are the protectors of humanity and its judges. When the shadows strike, we strike back. From the outer dark we come, and into its depths we shall return. The black sea beyond the stars calls to us. Te Karungi, the pale nomad, chief librarian of the Carcharodons Astra. I feel like that is a fitting point to end today's video. A introduction alongside a couple of interesting tidbits of history surrounding the creation of this chapter, both in a general sense of Warhammer lore and also a reintroduction to a much more fleshed out version to something that was initially probably a bit of a laughingstock when it was first announced in 1988 with its original color scheme and design. It was a different time, but as time evolves and things change, so does Warhammer. But that's pretty much it for today. If you enjoyed today's video and you do want to see more, then please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. I will undoubtedly be doing more of this, and I really want to follow up on some of the short stories that are inside of all of the Carcharodons books, because there's so many awesome moments that I really want to share. Whether they are short or longer stories, I really want to make sure that everyone in the community knows how awesome this chapter is. And also, on a final note, thank you all for 5,000 subscribers. It's a massive milestone, and it means so much to me. I cannot say thank you enough without prolonging the video more than it needs to. So to keep it short and sweet, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I hope to continue this journey with you all, and to become bigger and better as time goes on. But that's just about it from me. I've been Kiv, and I'm out.